Welcome in, everybody. I'm Reed Cowan. All right, so breaking news out of the Middle East, and it will make history. Israel and Hamas have agreed to a ceasefire deal. Here's your headline when we talk about this. An impending pause in the fighting in Gaza and the release of dozens of hostages. 7 of those known to be U.S. citizens, 3 of those believed to still be alive. Uncertain, though, at this hour about the other 4. So a lot could happen, a lot could change in the days and weeks ahead. But let's bring in CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio. You're live from Tel Aviv right now. Ramy, first of all, what are the terms of this deal? Let's break that down.
Reed, yeah, good to see you. Yes, massive breakthrough. Finally ending, or hopefully ending, in this kind of ceasefire, the past 466 days of war. But in terms of the details of this deal, this is separated into phase 1 and phase 2. In phase 1, this would last 42 days or 6 weeks, and we would see the release of 33 hostages. These names have been thrown around over the past week or so when Hamas resurfaced a list from last year. In this phase 1 agreement, we may see the first hostages, the optics that we so desperately want to see of people walking or getting ferried out of Gaza as soon as this weekend. We're seeing reports that it could be as soon as Sunday. This would include women, this would include the elderly, as well as the sick. And in exchange, Israel would then release dozens of Palestinians for each singular Israeli hostage. And we understand that it's a different number of Palestinian detainees that would be released for each individual hostage. So, for example, one hostage, a civilian hostage, would see the release of potentially 30 Palestinian detainees, but one female soldier could see the release of 50 Palestinian detainees. In addition, Israel's presence in Gaza would move. Israel's military would move towards the perimeters, clearing the way for the central part of the Strip, where neighborhoods, where cities have been, in order for that to be, in order for people to return to their homes, or, as you can imagine, what's left of their homes, not just in the south, but particularly in the north. Many people would be allowed to return to the north, but as we've been reporting over the past 15 months, the north really has been destroyed, obliterated in Israel's avowed quest to destroy Hamas.
Well, and Ramy, in this very tense atmosphere, I just got a direct message from someone who's connected to one of the hostage families. They're telling me they're still holding their breath. This does not, to them, feel like an exhale. We also know that you, because of your deep contacts and reporting, are in touch with some of the hostage families directly. What are they telling you at this hour?
Yeah, just in the past couple days, we've been talking face-to-face with the families of 3 Israeli hostages, and there is a mix. I've been texting some of them over the past hour or so as this news has been developing. One has told me that they feel relieved that this has happened, and that it has been a nightmare. You can imagine a nightmare of the push and pull of hope and the collapse of talks that have happened ever since the summer of last year. One other person said that it's complicated because their loved one, their brother, is actually not on that list of 33 people, and they're hoping that phase 2 will somehow become reality, but we have to get through phase 1 and the first 42 days, the first 6 weeks. So it is very tenuous, still moving ahead.
That's right. For our viewers who are just now tuning in, Israel and Hamas have agreed to a hostage release. We're having this live conversation with our Ramy Inocencio. They're live in Tel Aviv. And for our viewers, Ramy, we have new video. Reaction is now starting to come in. This video from the Gaza Strip, where people are out celebrating in the streets after that deal was announced. Can you describe what it is like on the ground where you are the past few days?
Right. The ground here, people have been anxiously hopeful, I think, are the words. It's almost as if families and friends here of hostages don't want to let themselves hope again. But that is all that they can do, because the alternative of the fear of death, or that they would never see their loved ones again, obviously is not tenable. They don't want to feel that. So anxious hope has been the feeling here. There's also been, at least up until this deal was just announced, the feeling of cynicism and of psychological warfare, psychological gaming from Hamas in the idea, the fact that we've been here before. Israel has been here before. These families have been here before. Mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters. In terms of the hope that they don't want to let themselves hope for fear that these things would still collapse. But again, now moving ahead, the deal has been confirmed that it is happened, that is agreed to by Israel and Hamas. We are expecting one of the negotiators, the chief negotiators of Qatar's leader, Qatar's prime minister, to announce this as well. But again, we're looking ahead to the approval of this deal by Israel's parliament, the Knesset, as early as tomorrow, and then again in the coming days, perhaps as early as Sunday, we could see those first few hostages. We're expecting 3 female hostages to be released from Gaza.
All right, so that speaks to timeline. But Ramy, as you pointed out when we've had conversations before, this deal could still fall through on Israel's side. We understand it goes through several different channels. But also the list of Palestinian prisoners, the names have not yet been released to my understanding. You may have had reporting where you are a little different than that. But when those names are released, it is our understanding that that could trigger some court challenges in Israel, and this deal could actually be on a bubble because of that at that point.
Yes, that's right. There are hundreds of Palestinian detainees held in prisons here who, the words of the Israeli government, have blood on their hands, that they have killed someone or many people. And the loved ones of those who have died obviously do not want those people released into any society, whether it's into Gaza, whether it's into a third country. So you can imagine the anger that would erupt from these families if they were to find out that the Palestinians are released after they have killed these people's loved ones. In terms of names, you mentioned that in your question. We have not gotten any names, but there has been talk on whether Marwan Barghouti, who is wanted and is in Israeli prison, will not be released. But looking ahead, we're expecting that it may be women, children, and wounded, but the high-value prisoners, those, again, that Israel says has blood on their hands, will not be released. Or if they're released, you can bet that people will be bracing for lawsuits, or that they would have to have some kind of guarantee, as much as you can get a guarantee, that they would not be able to come back anywhere near Gaza or Israel.
Under the cover of night, as this news breaks, Israel and Hamas have agreed to that ceasefire deal and the release of at least some of those hostages. Ramy Inocencio, thank you for being there on the scene in the night to bring us those late-breaking details. We may be coming back to you a little bit later here on CBS News 24/7. So let's deepen the conversation. Let's go live to CBS News contributor Robert Berger. You're live in Jerusalem, also very late right there where you are. So, Robert, let's go a little bit deeper about the process here. Once the names are released of those Palestinian prisoners still being held by Israel, things could definitely take a turn here. Is that why some of the hostage families are still holding their breath?
That's one reason. I should mention, though, I think the main reason they're holding their breath is you mentioned we've mentioned 33 hostages are going to be released. It's important to remember that 98 altogether are still being held in Gaza. So the fate of 65 still hasn't been decided. That's supposed to be decided in negotiations that will begin in a couple of weeks. And, if this is any yardstick, this agreement, it could take a long time to negotiate their release. So that's the concern among the families. I think the legal challenges in the Supreme Court, that will happen. It could perhaps slow things down, but I wouldn't expect that the court would block the release of these prisoners. It hasn't done that in the past.
Yeah, as Ramy just mentioned, he's been communicating directly with some of the hostage families whose names are not on that first release of those 33 that are expected to be released, some as soon as this weekend. So let's talk about the timeline here. 42 days is what has been agreed to. What happens in that 42 days?
So perhaps on Sunday, we would see the first release of the Israeli hostages. 33 is the number that I'm hearing unofficially that three women would be released. By the way, of the 33, not all of them are alive. We actually don't have a list yet, but it could be that maybe only 20 or so are alive, and the rest would be bodies that would be brought back to Israel for burial. Probably what's going to happen is that you'll see releases in batches of maybe three or four, with 4 or 5 days in between each batch of hostages that's released. And with each set of hostages that are released, you would see probably the release of maybe 100 or so Palestinian prisoners.
All right, so let's talk about what else happens in those 42 days, because the big question is, aside from the release of some of those Palestinian prisoners, what else is in it for Hamas? On the ground, how do things change for them, especially in the Gaza Strip?
Well, first of all, you have a ceasefire. They've been under Israeli bombardment now for 15 months, and much of Gaza has been destroyed. So they'll be able to come out really of their hiding places now and assess the damage, which, by the way, it's a mass destruction. And Israel won't be able to attack them like it has been over the past 15 months. The question is, of course, will this ceasefire hold over the next 6 weeks? It's fragile. If there's something like an ambush on Israeli soldiers, that could derail the process. But I think the feeling is that these 33 hostages will probably get out over the next 6 weeks. I think the bigger question is what happens in phase two to the remaining 65 or so hostages.
Right. And also, let's talk about getting aid into Gaza, badly needed for thousands of people there. Are there any points in this negotiation that increases aid into Gaza during this 42 days, Robert?
Yes, that's part of the deal, a surge in humanitarian aid. Right now, about 200 trucks a day are supposed to be going into Gaza. I don't actually know if it's quite that many, but this is supposed to surge now up to perhaps 600 trucks a day. That may be a little bit too ambitious. But, with the ceasefire, it would be possible to get this aid in without endangering the trucks and the truck drivers and looting and so on.
All right, and so we also have cameras trained on a room there in Qatar where we anticipate an announcement that really formalizes this to the world. So we just want to let our viewers know, as soon as somebody steps to that podium, we'll be watching for that very formal announcement in Qatar. Why is this taking longer? Obviously, this is spreading like wildfire online and on media of all sorts, confirmed that there's been this deal. But why are they not, do you think, stepping forward to the mic in Qatar?
They're probably just ironing out the final details, perhaps. That's not unusual, to be honest. The timetable is pretty good. It's about 8 or 9 o'clock here, local time. It takes time to I think, for them to formalize what they're going to say to the world, but we expect that this announcement will probably be coming in the next hour or so.
We are streaming coast to coast and worldwide here on CBS News 24/7. This breaking news that Hamas and Israel have reached a ceasefire deal that includes the release of some 33 hostages in the next 42 days. Let's talk about the American hostages. What do you know about American hostages that are still being held, Robert?
Yeah, so there are 7 Americans who were left in Gaza, but only 3 are believed to be alive. Now, in this first stage, you're talking about 33 hostages, mostly women and men over the age of 50. So, of the 3 Americans, we know that one, Keith Siegel, is 64 years old. So it's assumed or hoped that he would be among those released in this first phase. Now, the others, it's not clear. At least 1 or 2 of them are soldiers, and the soldiers would be the last to be released.
Robert Berger, thank you so much for joining us there
Sure.
from Jerusalem. We appreciate your perspective. So let's cross the waters now and go to CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. She's close to where the president-elect is in West Palm Beach, Florida. Nancy, Donald Trump famously warned that if this didn't happen by Inauguration Day, quote, all hell would break loose in the Middle East. We would imagine a little bit of a victory lap for Team Trump.
That's right. I think any question of whether Trump was going to claim credit for this deal has now been definitively answered. He put out a statement a short time ago saying that this epic ceasefire agreement could only have happened, Reed, because he was elected in November. Never mind the fact that Biden administration officials have been engaged in these very delicate negotiations for months. Note you have the president-elect and those who support him insisting that it is because of the public pressure that he placed on the Israelis, on Hamas, by saying repeatedly that there would be hell to pay if there was no hostage deal before he took office in 5 days, that really got things over the finish line. In fact, his incoming national security advisor, Reed, Mike Waltz, a congressman, put out a tweet or a post on X a short time ago, erasing any doubt about who they think is responsible for this development. He posted Trump's statement and added the words, "the Trump effect." So basically, that's the line you are going to be hearing from Republicans and Trump supporters, and potentially Trump himself in person at some point, that this is all because of Trump's influence. The president-elect himself is at his golf club today. We don't know if he was actually golfing or visiting with friends. We haven't gotten any indication that he is going to speak about this on camera, but given the fact that he put out a statement confirming the hostage deal before President Biden did, before any world leaders in Israel or the Middle East did, that's a sign, Reed, that he wants to stay on top of these developments and claim credit where he can.
And still yet a pressure cooker environment. You know, the first of those hostages is expected to be released before Inauguration Day. The balance of them over, 42 days to be released. But also, Nancy, we're mindful that if every part of this deal does not hold, there are still hostages being held somewhere in underground tunnels in Gaza or around that area. And he has got to see that this is performed for phase 2. The pressure is really on the president-elect.
Right. There's no question that no matter how well this deal works out, there are still going to be major issues on his plate when he takes office. The conflict continues to simmer. By some accounts, there have been as many terrorists created in Gaza as there were killed, or would-be terrorists, rather. And so this is something that will continue to challenge the president-elect, who has a very different relationship with the Prime Minister of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, than Joe Biden did. Biden repeatedly made no secret of the fact that he was frustrated with Netanyahu's handling of this war. Trump and Netanyahu have a much closer relationship. In fact, Netanyahu's wife came here to West Palm Beach to dine with Trump at Mar-a-Lago just a few days after he was elected in November.
For our viewers at home, a ceasefire deal and the release of hostages struck between Israel and Hamas. Nancy Cordes, CBS News Chief White House correspondent, thank you so much for that reaction from the president-elect's team. Always appreciate it.